A powerful man knelt in a field of ash, while the sky was still orange with the last of the fire, and he dug with his bare hands, like a man searching for something more important than his own life. The whole hillside had burned. The mansion behind him was a black skeleton. And still he dug, hour after hour, sleeve burned, fingers cut, refusing every person who came to lift him up. They thought he had lost his mind. They thought grief had broken him. But Jin was not crazy, and he was not only grieving. He was looking for a single ring that a woman had thrown into the fire before she ran away from him forever. And what almost nobody understood that night was this: the ring was never just a ring. It was the only thing in the world that could prove she was innocent. To understand why a man like Jin would crawl through burning ruins for a piece of metal, you have to understand the woman who threw it away. Her name was Imara, and she did not come to Seoul for love. She came for work. She came because she was very good at something most people never think about until the worst day of their lives. Imara could look at the remains of a fire and tell you the truth. Not the story the owners told, not the story the insurance papers told. The truth. Where it started, how fast it moved, whether it was an accident or a lie dressed up as one. She had grown up far away, on a warm coastline in a country most of the people around her would never bother to find on a map. She had clawed her way through school, through training, through years of being underestimated, until her name meant something in a small, serious world of people who investigate fire for a living. And that reputation was why a quiet, enormous business alliance reached across the ocean and offered her a contract she could not refuse. They called themselves BWAM House. They owned hotels, private security firms, shipping companies, and insurance arms that touched almost everything. And lately, BWAM House had a problem. Their properties kept burning down, and every time, the payout was enormous. Imara arrived in Seoul on a cold spring evening with 2 suitcases and a folder full of suspicions. She told herself she would stay 6 weeks, verify the claims, sign the reports, go home. She did not plan to fall into the most dangerous family in the city. She did not plan to fall in love with the one man inside it who was supposed to be untouchable. But the first time she stepped into the BWAM Tower and felt every eye slide over her like she did not belong, something in her went very quiet and very strong. She was used to rooms that did not want her. She had built an entire career out of proving those rooms wrong. If you are watching this right now, I want you to do something for me. Tell me in the comments which city you are watching from tonight, because Imara felt completely alone in Seoul, and I want her to know that people all over the world are listening to her story. Drop your city below. Let us see how far this fire travels. The man who met her at the top of that tower was Jin. He was the heir, the son the whole alliance was built around, and he was the coldest person Imara had ever shaken hands with. He looked at her audit folder the way other men look at an insult. He told her, in perfect, clipped English, that the fires were tragedies and that her contract was a formality. He told her not to dig too deep. And Imara, who had been told not to dig too deep her entire life, smiled politely and decided to dig deeper than anyone ever had. For 2 weeks they circled each other like opponents. She requested documents, he delayed them. She asked to visit the burn sites. He sent a driver to take her the long way. But here is the strange thing about 2 intelligent people who are pretending to be enemies. They start to respect each other before they admit it. Jin noticed that Imara never raised her voice and never missed a detail. Imara noticed that Jin obstructed her in public, but quietly made sure she was safe in private. She noticed that when his uncle spoke, Jin's jaw tightened. She noticed that this cold man hated something inside his own family, and she could not figure out what. The family was ruled by an old man named Sang. He was the elder, the one whose single word could end a meeting or end a person. Sang believed in tradition, in reputation, in the family name above all things. And the family name had a shadow inside it, a cousin named Hoon. Hoon smiled more than anyone else in that tower, and Imara trusted him the least. He complimented her shoes. He asked about her country. He offered to help her with her audit, which was exactly the moment her instincts screamed that this man was the one she should fear. The first burn site Imara visited changed everything. It was a warehouse near the water, gutted and cold. The official report said faulty wiring. But Imara crouched in the ash, ran her gloved fingers along the floor, and saw what the report did not want anyone to see. The burn pattern was wrong. Fire from bad wiring climbs and spreads in a certain way. This fire had started in 4 places at once. 4. That is not an accident. That is a decision. Somebody had walked through that warehouse and set it like a stage, then collected a fortune from the insurance arm that Daewon House owned. It was fraud. It was deliberate. And whoever did it was still inside the family. She photographed everything. She measured the char depth on the support beams, the way the heat had pooled in the corners, the faint, clean lines where something had been poured and then carefully wiped out of the official photographs. She knew this kind of work. She knew that fire tells the truth long after the people who set it have gone home and changed their clothes. And the more she looked, the more she understood that the person behind this was not careless and was not desperate. The person behind this was patient. Whoever it was had been doing this for years, learning, improving, getting better at making theft look like a tragedy. That patience frightened her more than any single fire ever could. Careless people make mistakes you can catch. Patient people wait for you to make yours. That night, Jin found her working alone in a glass office, surrounded by photographs of burn patterns. He did not pretend anymore. He closed the door, sat across from her, and said something that froze her. He said, "I know the fires are not accidents. I have known for a long time. And I cannot prove it without someone like you." For the first time, the cold man looked tired instead of dangerous. He told her that he believed someone in his own family was burning Daewon properties to drain the alliance and seize power. He did not say the name yet, but Imara saw the name in his eyes, and it had a smile she did not trust. From that night, everything shifted. They stopped being opponents and became something rarer. 2 people guarding the same secret. They met late, after the building emptied. They traded what they knew in low voices. Jin showed her sealed claim documents. Imara showed him fire patterns. And in the spaces between the evidence, something else grew, slow and impossible and warm. She would catch him watching her. He would catch her smiling. Neither of them said the word, but the word was there, sitting in every quiet room they shared. She noticed the small ways he protected her, without ever announcing it. The way he made sure her parking spot was the one closest to the door, so she never walked through the dark garage alone. The way he learned how she took her coffee, and never once mentioned that he had learned it. He was a man who had been taught his whole life to show nothing, and so he showed his heart in the only language he had, in logistics, in safety, in quiet arrangements that nobody else would ever notice. And Imara, who had spent her life being underestimated by people who assumed a foreign woman in a borrowed city must be naive, slowly understood that this cold air saw her more clearly than anyone in that entire tower. He saw a mind as sharp as his own. And in a family that valued bloodline above brilliance, that recognition was its own kind of love. Still, the danger never left the room. Every time a relative passed them in a hallway, Imara felt the calculation in their eyes. The foreign contractor and the heir. To them, she was not a person. She was a liability, a stain on a family portrait that had taken generations to paint. She heard the whispers she was not meant to hear, the comments about where she came from, the assumption that she wanted his money because what else could a woman like her possibly want? She swallowed all of it and kept working, because she had swallowed worse, and because the truth she was chasing mattered more than their opinion of her. Imara knew it was dangerous. A foreign contractor and the heir of a power family. The whole world would call it a scandal. Her career could not survive it. His family would never allow it. And still, on a rainy night in a black car parked outside her building, when Jin reached over and held her hand instead of letting her go inside, she did not pull away. She let herself, for one moment, want something she had spent her whole life refusing to want. Now here is where I have to ask you something, because this story is about to get much harder. Imara had a choice to make. She could keep her relationship with Jin a secret and keep working the case. Or she could report what was happening, walk away clean, and protect her own career before she got pulled in too deep. If you were Imara, knowing this family controlled hotels, security firms, and the police favors that come with money, would you have stayed for love and the truth? Or would you have run while you still could? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. I genuinely want to know, because what she chose almost destroyed her. Imara stayed. And because she stayed, she got close enough to see the one thing the family wanted hidden. There was an old estate in the mountains outside the city, a grand house that Sang had built decades ago. It was the heart of the family, the place where the alliance had been founded. And Imara discovered that this estate had been quietly reinsured for an enormous sum just 3 months earlier. A property nobody lived in anymore, suddenly worth a fortune if it burned. She felt her stomach drop. She knew what that pattern meant. The estate was the next fire, and she was the only person who could prove it before it happened. She told Jin. And Jin did something that surprised her. He gave her a ring. Not in a grand way, not on one knee with music. He gave it to her in the quiet of his car, pressed it into her palm, and told her it had belonged to his grandmother. He said, "Whatever happens, this stays with you. Keep it close. Do not take it off." Imara thought it was love, and it was. But she did not know that the ring was something more. Engraved on the inside of that simple band was a tiny line of numbers, a code, a key to a sealed vault where the only hard evidence against the real arsonist was locked away. Jin gave her the ring because she was the one person he trusted to protect it. He just could not tell her why, not yet. Because the more she knew, the more they could hurt her. This is the part of the story where everything that could go wrong began to go wrong, all at once. The way disaster always seems to wait until you finally feel safe. And I think a lot of you have felt that exact moment in your own lives. That moment where things are finally good, and some quiet part of you whispers, "This is too good. Something is coming." If you have ever felt that, type the word "felt" in the comments, because Imara felt it the night before the fire. Lying awake, holding that ring, certain that something terrible was about to happen, and unable to stop it. The call came at 2 in the morning. The mountain estate was burning. Imara dressed in the dark and drove up the winding road with her heart in her throat, because this was the fire she had predicted, the one she could finally catch in the act. She arrived to chaos. The great house was wrapped in flame, the orange light pouring across the hillside, security men shouting, the heat pushing against her face like a living thing. And then someone told her that there were documents inside, the original claim files, the proof, still in the study, about to burn forever. She should have stayed outside. Every rule she had ever taught said stay outside. But Imara had spent her whole life running toward fire, while everyone else ran away. And she could not let the evidence die in there. So she covered her face and went in. The smoke was a wall. The heat was unbearable. She found the study, grabbed what she could, and that is when she heard the door behind her lock. Someone had locked her inside a burning house. Someone wanted her to die in that fire and become the convenient story. The foreign woman who got too curious and perished in a tragic accident. Imara survived because she was smart and because she was lucky. She found a service door. She got low. She crawled. And she came out the far side coughing and burned and alive, collapsing in the grass while the house roared behind her. She had stayed alive by doing the opposite of what panic screams at you to do. She did not run for the door she had come through, the one now locked. She remembered the floor plan she had studied that afternoon, the old servant passages every grand estate of that era was built with. She pressed her hand to the wall and followed it through the smoke by touch alone, counting doorways, trusting the map in her head over the terror in her chest. Twice she nearly passed out. Twice she made herself keep moving, because she knew that the people who die in fires are almost always the ones who freeze. She did not freeze. She crawled until the air changed, until she felt cold night against her face, and she threw herself out into the grass and lay there with her lungs full of smoke and her mind already racing. Because even half-conscious, the investigator in her had registered one impossible fact. That door had not jammed. That door had been locked. From the outside. By a hand. She lay there shaking, certain now of one terrible fact. This was not just fraud anymore. Someone had tried to murder her. And as she pulled the rescued documents from inside her jacket, her hands black with soot, she saw something that broke her heart into pieces. Among the papers she had saved was a report, a forensic fire report, dated, signed, official. And it named her. It placed Imara at the scene of 3 earlier fires. It built a careful, lying case that the foreign contractor had been setting the fires herself for a cut of the insurance money. It was a frame, complete and professional, designed to make her the arsonist the moment anyone went looking. And the file had come from Jin's private office. His seal was on the folder. His access code was on the metadata. Everything she could see pointed to one impossible, devastating conclusion. The man who gave her his grandmother's ring had built the trap that was meant to bury her. I need you to sit with how that felt for her, because the heart does not check the facts before it breaks. Imara was burned, nearly murdered, lying in the grass beside a house someone had locked her inside, and the only explanation she could see was that Jin had used her. That the late nights and the quiet hands and the ring were all a long, patient lie to set her up as the one who would take the fall when the family's crimes finally surfaced. She felt the worst kind of betrayal there is. Not the betrayal of a stranger. The betrayal of the one person you finally let yourself trust. Jin arrived minutes later. He had driven through the night the instant he heard. He ran to her, fell to his knees, reached for her face. And Imara recoiled from him like he was the fire. She held up the report with shaking hands. She asked him one question in a voice that barely worked. "Did you do this?" And Jin, who had 1,000 things to explain and no time to explain them, made the worst mistake of his life. He hesitated, because the honest answer was complicated, and complicated takes time, and her heart had no time left that night. In that hesitation, Imara saw confirmation. She saw guilt. So she did the thing that the title of this story promised you. She pulled his grandmother's ring off her burned finger, and with everything she had left, she threw it into the heart of the burning ruin. She threw it into the fire. And then she turned and she ran, down the dark mountain road, away from the house, away from the family, away from the man who knelt in the ash, calling her name. She ran, and she did not look back, and she swore she would never see Seoul again. And here is the cruelest part of the whole night. She was wrong. Jin had not framed her. The report had been planted in his office to look like his. It had been forged by the one person who needed both of them gone, the cousin who smiled too much, the man who had locked the study door himself. Hoon. Hoon had set the estate fire. Hoon had built the frame. Hoon had designed this exact moment, where Imara would either die in the house or run from Jin, believing the worst. And either way, Hoon would win. The fire was a trap with 2 doors, and Imara had walked through one of them straight into his hands. Now I want to pause, because by this point in the story, a lot of you have probably formed a theory, and I am curious how close you are. You have met the smiling cousin. You have met the cold heir. You have met the old man who rules the family. Who do you suspect is really pulling the strings here? And who do you think will betray someone before this is over? Write your suspicions in the comments now, before the next part, because what Jin did next is the reason this story has the title it has. While Imara ran down the mountain, Jin stayed. He did not chase her. He did the one thing that could still save her. He started to dig in the fire for the ring, because that ring held the code to the vault, and that vault held the only evidence that could prove Imara was innocent and Hoon was guilty. The ring was not a memory. It was her freedom, and he would crawl through hell to get it back. He dug for hours. The security men begged him to stop. Sang himself was called, and even the old man could not move him. Jin's hands blistered, his knees bled. The sun came up over a black hillside, and a powerful man who had never knelt for anyone in his life was on his knees in the ruins of his family's home, sifting ash through his fingers, looking for the one small thing that could bring back the woman he loved and the truth at the same time. The staff thought he had broken. They did not know he was the only sane person on that mountain. Think about what that took. The ground was still hot. The beams were still smoking. Every part of his body was telling him to stop, and every part of his mind was telling him that the search was probably hopeless, that a small ring thrown into a fire that size could be anywhere, melted, buried, gone. A reasonable man would have given up after 20 minutes. But Jin was not being reasonable. He was being something rarer and harder. He was being faithful. He divided the ruin into a grid in his head, the way a search team divides a field, and he worked it section by section, on his hands and knees, refusing to let himself hope and refusing to let himself quit. He did not eat, he did not drink, he did not speak. Hour after hour, while the family watched from a distance and whispered that the heir had finally lost his mind, Jin kept his head down and kept digging. Because somewhere in all that destruction was the one thing that could undo the worst night of both their lives, and he would not leave that mountain without it. Imara reached the city as the sun rose. She had one friend in Seoul, a bright, fierce woman named Keza, who had come over from Imara's own country years earlier and built a life as a translator. Keza took one look at her, burned and shaking and clutching a folder, and did not ask a single useless question. She ran a bath. She bandaged the burns. She made tea Imara could not drink. And then, gently, she asked what happened. And Imara told her everything, and at the end of it, she said the words she believed with her whole broken heart. He set me up, Keza. Jin set me up to die. But Keza was not the kind of friend who simply agrees. Keza was the kind of friend who asked the hard question. She looked at the forged report for a long time, and then she said something that planted a tiny, painful seed of doubt. She said, Imara, you investigate fires for a living. You know that the most obvious evidence is usually the planted evidence. If Jin wanted to frame you, why would he leave his own seal all over it like a signature? The real arsonist never signs the work. Imara did not want to hear it. She wanted to be angry, because anger was easier than hope. But she was an investigator, and the seed was planted, and seeds like that grow. Imara decided to leave the country. It was the rational choice. Clear her name from a safe distance, hire lawyers, never set foot in that tower again. Keza drove her to the airport, and for about 20 minutes, it felt like the story might simply end there, with Imara escaping a city that had nearly killed her. That is the false safety, the moment where you exhale. But the exhale never lasts in a story like this. At the check-in counter, the agent's face changed. She typed. She frowned. She called a colleague. And Imara, who could read danger like she could read fire, understood before they said a word. Her name had been flagged. There was a hold on her passport. She was not leaving. Someone with enormous power had reached into the airport system and locked the doors of the entire country around her. That someone had a quiet helper, a man named Un. Un was the family's surveillance specialist, the one who managed the cameras and the sealed files and the digital systems that watched everything. For years, Un had served whoever paid him and asked no questions. He had frozen Imara's watch list on Un's orders. But Un had also spent those same years watching the family through 1,000 cameras, and he had seen things that disturbed him. He had seen Un enter the estate the night of the fire. He had the footage. And Un was beginning to wonder which side he wanted to be on when this finally broke open. While Imara was trapped in the city, Un made his next move, and it was a modern one, the kind of attack that did not need a single bullet. He used Sue. Sue was the woman the family had always wanted Jin to marry, elegant and well-connected, and positioned for years as the appropriate bride, the one who fit. Sue did not love Jin, but she loved the future the family had promised her, and she had watched a foreign contractor walk in and take everything that was supposed to be hers. So when Un came to her with a story and a stack of carefully edited screenshots, Sue did not look too closely. She wanted to believe it, and she posted it. Within hours, Imara's face was everywhere. Korean gossip feeds lit up with a story about a foreign con artist who had seduced the heir of a respected family and burned their historic estate for insurance money. The forged report leaked. The screenshots spread. Strangers who had never met her decided they knew exactly who she was. The comments were brutal. Her photo, her country, her career, all of it dragged through a digital fire that moved faster than any flame on any hillside. In one night, Imara stopped being an investigator and became a villain in a story written by the very man who had tried to kill her. What made it so cruel was how clean it looked. Un had not needed to forge anything new. He simply took the report he had already planted, added Sue's wounded, believable voice, and let thousands of strangers do the rest for free. That is the terrifying thing about a lie in our world now. It does not need to be true. It only needs to be shareable. And a beautiful foreign woman, accused of seducing a rich man and burning down his family's home, was the most shareable story Seoul had seen in months. By morning, people were standing outside the BWAM tower with their phones out, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman the entire internet had already convicted. Imara watched it all from Keza's small apartment, refreshing the screen with shaking hands, watching her name turn into a punchline, and feeling something she had never felt in her entire, careful, competent life. She felt powerless. And this is the part that feels so painfully modern, doesn't it? Because we have all watched it happen. We have all seen someone destroyed online before anyone bothered to ask whether it was true. So let me ask you directly, because your answer matters to where this story goes. When the whole internet had already decided Imara was guilty, when even her own reputation was burning, do you think Jin should have stayed loyal to her and risked his family and his name to defend a woman the entire city now hated? Or had she already lost too much to be saved? Tell me honestly in the comments, would you have stayed loyal to her? Because Jin had to answer that exact question, and the family was about to force his hand. Sang called a family council. The scandal had reached the point where it threatened the BWAM name itself, and to Sang, the name was everything. The old man's solution was cold and simple. Hand the foreign woman over to the authorities. Let her take the blame. Protect the family. Sang did not know she was innocent. He only knew she was convenient. And Un stood at the old man's shoulder, smiling, watching his plan close like a trap with no exit. All he needed now was for Jin to stay silent, for the heir to choose the family over the woman. And everyone in that room expected him to. Jin walked into the council with bandaged hands and ash still under his fingernails, and he did not sit down. He told them the truth they did not want to hear. He told them the fires were not accidents. He told them someone in the family had been burning BWAM properties for years and draining the alliance from the inside. He told them Imara was the only honest person who had come close to the truth, which was exactly why someone had tried to murder her in the estate. The room went silent. Sang's face turned to stone. And Hoon, still smiling, said the words designed to end it. He said, "And where is your proof, Jin? Without proof, this is just a heartbroken boy defending a criminal. Show us the proof or sit down." Jin reached into his pocket and set something on the table. It was the ring. Scorched black, warped by the heat, found at dawn after hours in the ash. He had found it, and inside that ring was the code. And the code opened the vault, and the vault held everything. Jin looked at his uncle and said, "The proof has been here the whole time. You just needed the key." And for the first time, the smile on Hoon's face flickered, because the one thing he thought he had destroyed in the fire was sitting on the table in front of the entire family. But Jin needed more than a code. He needed Imara, and he needed the footage. And he needed all of it in the same room at the same time, in front of witnesses, before Hoon could move money or silence anyone. So he sent for her. Keza brought her to the BWAM event hall that night, through a private entrance, past the cameras Yoon quietly turned away. Imara walked back into the world that had tried to kill her, burned and exhausted, and accused by an entire country. And she walked in anyway. Because Keza had been right. The real arsonist never signs the work. And Imara had finally understood who had. Yoon was waiting. The surveillance man had made his choice. He handed Imara a drive containing the footage from the night of the estate fire. Footage Hoon believed had been erased. And he told her something that filled in the last piece. The watch list on her passport, the lock on the whole country, had been placed by Hoon, not by Jin. Every door that had closed around her had Hoon's hand on it. Imara held the drive, and the ring, and the original documents she had carried out of the fire. And for the first time since that night on the mountain, she did not feel like prey. She felt like an investigator standing at the end of a very long case. The vault opened in front of the assembled alliance. Inside were the original claim files, the real ones, showing the same falsified pattern across every fire, all routed through accounts that traced back to one man. And then the footage played on the great screen of the event hall. The whole family watched Hoon walk through the burning estate the night Imara nearly died. They watched him lock the study door with her inside it. They watched him do the thing he had spent the entire story blaming on everyone else. There was no gunfire in that room, no violence, just a video, a vault, and a silence so complete you could hear the old man breathing. Hoon's empire of smiles and rumors and sealed files came apart in the space of 90 seconds, undone by the same surveillance and evidence he had used as weapons. Sue was in that room. And Sue, who had posted the lie that burned Imara's name across the city, watched the truth play out on the screen and went pale. She understood, all at once, that she had not been a player in Hoon's game. She had been a tool. He had used her jealousy and her wounded pride to do his dirtiest work, and he would have let her carry part of the blame if it ever came to that. Sue turned to the family, and in a shaking voice she told them everything Hoon had given her, every screenshot, every instruction. She did not do it to save Imara. She did it because she finally saw that the man she had trusted had been using her all along. And sometimes that is enough. Sang rose from his chair. The old man had spent the whole night believing he was protecting his family from a foreign criminal, and now he understood that the threat had been sitting at his own right hand, smiling, for years. He looked at Hoon for a long moment, and then he looked away from him, which in that family was worse than any shout. He had Hoon removed and turned over to face what the evidence demanded, quietly, the way that family did everything. And then Sang did something no one expected. He turned to Imara, the outsider he had been ready to sacrifice that very morning, and he bowed his head to her. A small bow, but from him, it was an apology the size of a mountain. The case was over. The fires were solved. Imara's name began to clear as the truth spread through the same feeds that had condemned her. But the hardest part of the night was still waiting, and it had nothing to do with arson. It had to do with two people standing in an emptying hall, with everything finally explained and nothing yet forgiven. Because being proven innocent is not the same as being able to trust again. Imara had thrown his ring into the fire. She had believed he wanted her dead. And no vault, no footage, no bow from an old man could erase the fact that in her darkest moment, she had looked at Jin and seen a murderer. Jin came to her slowly. He did not defend himself. He did not list everything he had done. He simply held out his hand, and in his burned palm was the ring, the scorched and warped band he had dug out of the ash with bleeding fingers while she ran down the mountain hating him. He said, "I am not giving this back to own you. I dug for it because it was the only thing that could save you, and I would do it again with my bare hands 1,000 times. You do not have to take it, but I needed you to know what those hours were really for." Imara looked at the ring, blackened by the same fire she had thrown it into, and she understood at last what the title of her own life that night had really meant. She had left her ring in the fire, and the most powerful man in the city had dug for hours, not for love letters or sentiment, but to pull the truth out of the ashes and lay it at her feet. She thought about every quiet night, the hesitation that had broken her heart, which she now understood was a man who simply could not explain something complicated fast enough to save himself. She thought about Keza's words, "The real arsonist never signs the work." And she made her choice. Not because the family arranged it, not because she was trapped, not because she had nowhere else to go. She chose him because she had finally seen, all the way through, who he was. She took the ring. Not the way it had been given the first time, in secrecy and fear. She took it in an empty hall, with the whole truth finally in the light, and she put it on her own burned finger herself. Imara stayed in Seoul, not as a contractor, not as a scandal, not as anyone's convenient story. She stayed because she decided to, on her own terms, the way she had done every important thing in her life. Sang named Jin the rightful heir of a cleaner Daewon house, and the old man quietly made sure the world learned that the foreign investigator everyone had condemned was the one who had saved the family from itself. Keza stayed close, the friend who had asked the one question that saved everything. Eun walked away from the family business and slept better than he had in years, having finally chosen a side. Sue left the city to build a life that was actually her own, no longer waiting for a future someone else had promised her. And Hoon faded into the silence that family reserved for the ones who betrayed it, the smile finally gone. There is one last image I want to leave you with, because it is the only piece of this story that never fully resolved, and I think it is the most beautiful part. Long after that night, long after the burns healed and the headlines died, there was a single mark on Jin's hand that never washed away. A faint gray shadow of ash worked deep into the skin of his palm, from the hours he spent digging in the ruins. He could have removed it. He never did. And whenever Imara asked him why, he would close his hand around hers and tell her the same thing. He said, "It reminds me that the most important thing I ever found I found on my knees in the ash, after I had already lost everything. Some things you do not wash away. Some things you keep. If this story moved you, if you felt even one moment of it, do me a small favor before you go. Subscribe and tell me in the comments which part hit you the hardest. The fire, the betrayal, the ring, or the moment he dug for hours to save the woman who thought he wanted her gone. Your words keep these stories alive, and there is another one waiting for you the moment you are ready. Stay a little longer with me. The next story is already burning,